Hmm. Hi, everyone. My name is Anne-Marie Hoftailing, and I am the co-founder of Story Imprinting, and I am here today with my gorgeous, lovely, and highly competent, learned colleague and partner, Holly Amaya. And we want to talk today about areas of our work that people are less aware of, and what we do and why we do it, and why it might be important. So with that said, Ms. Holly Amaya, I would like you to share something that people are not super aware that we do that's really important, and we're super also very proud of and love doing this work.
Yes, thank you. I do a lot of public relations and media strategy for plaintiffs' law firms. And I'll get to why this is important, but I want to kind of spend a minute talking about, when you and I started this company right before the pandemic, I was sort of at this phase where I was like, I don't know how much PR I'm going to continue to do. I was coming off of a stretch of my career where that was all that I was doing at a very intense high level. And I was, obviously very excited to start traveling around the country in the beginning of 2020, doing training. And, we all know what happened next. I don't need to spoiler alert, right? So I did a session on storytelling for a consumer attorneys bar association, and was sort of inundated and was shocked, actually. I don't know if you remember this. I was shocked at the level of interest I got from plaintiffs' attorneys who wanted help telling the stories of their clients, most of whom are in the one down position, in litigation, who, suffered some sort of wrong, whether that is, in a variety of situations. A lot of the work that started coming our way were cases involving civil rights violations, and just some egregious sets of circumstances. For obvious reasons, I can't talk about who those clients are, what specifics as to those stories are, because we choose to remain very under the radar with that work. I mean, I truly believe it. I believe it to be sort of a way of giving back, a public service in a way. But what I have realized in doing this sort of support work for these firms is that you can have the best trial attorney, the best advocate working for you, but ultimately someone's got to be able to distill, to sort of sift through the intricacies of all the legal jargon, of the procedure, of all of that stuff, and tell a really cogent story about what happened to this person and why that should be remedied. And I'm a lawyer as well. I don't practice anymore, and so I think that makes it a little bit easier for me to be that person for these firms, right? Because I can sort of speak their language and say, but we have to distill this story to something that people are going to understand. And so it's just really, it's this area that we don't advertise it on our website. It's really been more of a word of mouth thing, but the work has been so steady. And every time I work on one of these cases, I'll say to Anne-Marie, God, I just think, my God, I wish that other people had somebody to be able to do this for them, because I have seen the impact in sort of shining a light on these stories. But it's just, for whatever reason, it's not something that a lot of folks who have a PR background or a journalism background focus their attentions on.
So many of you probably don't know this, but Holly has a background of being both a former journalist and former attorney. So she is not just highly, but uniquely qualified to do this kind of work in a way that's really particular to these audiences. And I think for some people, they might not totally understand, hey, aren't these things being battled out in a courtroom? Why do they need a story in the local paper about this civil rights issue that took place in this town or in this city? What's the value of having that if they're just going to battle it out in a courtroom anyway? And I think that that's an important thing to answer.
That's a great question. Yeah. So a couple of reasons, or a couple of responses to that. I think first, from a practical perspective, journalists are not, trolling the register of actions and the calendar every day for courtrooms that they're covering and going in and just sitting and listening. They don't have the bandwidth to do that. Frequently, even reporters that cover a legal beat, they'll get a daily report that says, Hoftailing versus whatever, right? So, but they have no idea what the case is about. It costs money to pull the complaint. Newsrooms really don't have the money to do that. And so there's lots of just really practical barriers. So they do rely on people like me to let them know, hey, this case is happening, you know, and here's sort of like I can get you sort of an executive summary of what's going on and set up time to talk to the lawyers, set up time to talk to the client, that type of thing. I also think, you know, there's the legal process, and then there's, you know, the public facing audience for this type of work. And to really, I strongly believe that to initiate social change and appropriate change, the legal process is part of it, but it's just one part of it, right? I think being able, if you're a taxpayer in, you know, some jurisdiction where there's egregious wrongdoing by, you know, some department within the city, for example, or within that municipality, you might not necessarily know about that, right? I mean, even if there's a case about it and I'm speaking totally hypothetically here, because that's a nice benign example, right? But you're going to know about it and learn about it because a reporter has dug into it in your local news outlet. And so, you know, I think that that's the reason that this type of work is really important. And then, you know, to be totally frank with you, like plaintiffs' attorneys, most of them work on a contingency basis, right? Which that means, if you're not familiar, they don't get paid until they settle a case or they get some sort of, you know, financial outcome in a case. And so for them, it makes sense to invest in PR, frankly, because that's how they're getting their next client, right? I mean, I think about, I always laugh because I'm like, I've been going to the same dentist for 15 years. And how did I find this dentist? I didn't like, you know, look them up in terms of like, where did they go to dental school? A partner that I worked for in my first law firm was like, oh, you should go to these people. They're close to where you live. And I thought the other day, like, I wouldn't even begin to know how to find a new dentist other than asking around, right? And sort of and figuring it out that way. I think for a lot of people who find themselves in a situation of needing an attorney in a plaintiff's situation where they're, you know, the one bringing the lawsuit, if they're not familiar with law firms, if they're not deep pocketed and have one on retainer or something, this is like a totally unfamiliar process for them to navigate. So they're going to be Googling, they're going to be like looking to see like, oh, Anne Marie was quoted in the San Diego Union Tribune about blah, blah, blah. That must mean she knows what she's talking about. And so there's tremendous value in this, I think, for the firms as well. But for me, it's really about, you know, I don't take every plaintiff's, we don't take every plaintiff's firm that comes in. It has to be really compelling. Obviously, there has to be no conflicts, which I always check first. But it has to be something that I believe, like, this is a story that needs to be told. And without someone like me helping, it will get lost.
Which brings me to sort of my final question and bridges us to this other issue. If somebody is listening to this and they think, well, I don't know, is my case worthy of getting, is this something I should, like, how do I know that I have a case that I should maybe call you and have a conversation about whether this has potential to be a candidate for PR?
I think you always ask, because I mean, it's funny. I can't give you, this is such a wishy-washy answer, but because I've spent so much of my life in newsrooms or dealing with newsrooms, my news judgment is usually pretty spot on. Like, I will tell you that is a crap case. Like, don't waste your money on me because it's just not going to get any traction, which frankly, if we're hiring any sort of expert or advocate, that's the kind of advice you want to get, right? Yep. I don't feel good about taking someone's money for something that I think is like a loser. And conversely, if I will be able to tell you almost immediately if I think that there's legs. And I think, you know, that if you're listening to this and you're trying out PR firms, you should absolutely ask for that initial consultation, right? Like, I'm never, ever going to take your money before I've given you an assessment as to whether I think I can do anything with it. That's just disingenuous. That's not how we work. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. No, I think that's super useful. And thank you so much for being here. If you think this is something that you have some interest in, this is your first time ever using someone, talking to someone, Holly is a super accessible person. And as I said, she is exceptionally both qualified and talented at this work. She's done some really incredible casework that we don't publicize, but she would be happy to talk to you privately about. You would be very lucky to work with her because she's really exceptional. This is not the work that I do in our company, but it is the work she does and that I am very happy to support. We thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Please be sure to like this, subscribe, make a comment, even make a comment that you disagree, but just be kind, be decent. We are creating a space of humanity in the corporate business world, and we would like to make sure that that is also maintained in the virtual world. So we thank you so much for being here with us today. Be sure to connect with us if you need to. If you have any questions at all, feel free to email us directly, and we would be happy to answer that. Go out there, collect some stories, and be good to one another. Thank you.
Thank you.